collusion. No evidence of collusion. 18 months of Adam Schiff lies. Put up or shut up, Adam. I'm so sick of these people. Look at what they've done to the country.
Hey, you know what, Hannity? I want you to invite Maxine Waters to come sit down with you and really have a beautiful conversation. I think the two of you will really...
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time. Impeach 45. She says the same thing in every speech.
Oh, well, Sean, great show tonight. Thanks, thanks for everything. And good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. We have tons of news for you tonight, including an exclusive interview with former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. He's here. We're going to get his take on the Trump tariff fight, turnover at the White House, and that special election in Pennsylvania. But the big news of the night, the House Intel Committee is ending its Russia collusion investigation. We're going to tell you what they found out. Plus, a string of deadly package bombs are terrorizing Austin, Texas. We're going to have a report on the very latest. And it's happened again. Another potentially dangerous illegal immigrant released by local authorities before ICE could take custody of him. Unbelievable. But first, opposition within and without. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The political and media elites were in their usual freak-out mode after the president spoke in Pennsylvania over the weekend. But while they were busy obsessing over his, well, pretty darn harsh slam on NBC's Chuck Todd, they missed the real heat.
We put on tariffs, and the European Union's out there, well, we're going to put on. I said, you can't go any higher than you are anyway. And they have trade barriers. We can't even sell our farming goods in there. They totally restrict us. So then they say, we want those tariffs taken off. I said, good. Open up the barriers and get rid of your tariffs. And if you don't do that, we're going to tax Mercedes-Benz. We're going to tax BMW. You want to have money?
Oh, it was like back of the campaign trail. It's awesome. Ever since President Trump announced his decision to slap tariffs on steel and aluminum imports coming into the United States, Republicans on the Hill have been trying to convince him, Mr. President, you're wrong.
Imposing these steel tariffs have just interjected uncertainty into the economy where it just wasn't necessary.
We're going to end up costing more jobs because of the tariffs that then will be saved.
I disagree with the president. I don't know of any trade war that ends well. That's not my reading of history.
We want to limit as much unintended consequences and collateral economic damage as possible.
How many of those guys want Ohio, Wisconsin? Well, now they're threatening to pass legislation that would essentially nullify the president's executive order.
When you say, all right, let's have tariffs, but let's couple that with uncertainty, that's almost worse. I mean, those are dual poisons to the economy. You know, tariffs are awful. Tariffs married to uncertainty is probably even worse.
We have some legislative tools at our disposal. The question is, of course, how do we get that to the president for his signature?
I'm not happy with it because these tariffs are actually going to be a tax on the American citizens. I think there's a good chance that we will nullify them, at least if I have my way.
Well, with all due respect to Senator Hatch, like, you supported GATT, you supported the TPP, you actually wanted to expand NAFTA, and you supported giving Obama fast-track trade authority. Senator Hatch has been wrong on every trade-related issue, in my mind. And now he and Jeff Flake, both soon to be retirees, by the way, are suddenly the sledgehammers against tariffs. Well, once again, we see that most on Capitol Hill still do not get why Donald Trump, against all expert predictions, won the GOP nomination and the presidency. Does Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan really believe that Trump would have won Pennsylvania, won Ohio, and won Wisconsin had he simply touted the old globalist line that all trade, no matter what happens to the American worker, is good trade? Do you remember all of the rosy predictions about opening up our trade relationship with China? It was going to be fabulous. They were going to be freer and more free press and, oh, please. No objective review of what's happened since 2001, when we approved China's entry into the World Trade Organization, would say that it's been a win for the U.S. Last year, we had the highest trade deficit on record with China. And by the way, China has brazenly ripped off our intellectual property, and they flooded the world markets with an excess capacity of steel and aluminum. And what's happened? Well, you see those numbers there. This has driven down prices worldwide and driven great U.S. companies out of business. by giving massive subsidies to their own industries, the Chinese communist regime, let's not forget that, engages in rampant unfair trade practices and ends up distorting the global marketplace. Markets aren't efficient the way they operate. And as the president reiterated in Pennsylvania, look, Europe doesn't have clean hands on the trade issue either. Right now, we're running a $150 billion trade deficit with the EU. And we know they put up unfair barriers, as the president said, to our agricultural products, massive subsidies to Airbus. Europe has been taking advantage of the United States for too long, both in failing to meet its military obligations under NATO and in the trade arena. Well, Trump has already forced their hands on the NATO issue, and the sky did not fall. They're actually contributing more to the military. Now he's defending U.S. economic interests with these fairly narrowly cast two aluminum and steel tariffs. And there's a lot of historical precedents here. As Pat Buchanan wrote in a recent column, from Lincoln to William McKinley to Theodore Roosevelt and Warren Harding through Calvin Coolidge, the Republican Party erected the most awesome manufacturing machine the world had ever seen. And as the party of high tariffs, through those 7 decades, the GOP was rewarded by becoming America's party. Trump's instincts on trade have been spot on for decades. As China has become more repressive and U.S. median wages flattened for 15 straight years, mainline Republicans offered the middle class more of the same. We got more wars, more immigration, and more trade deals. And the GOP establishment and some of the Democrats, well, they heard the calls of Wall Street. They did not hear the voices of men like this.
My father, during the 80s, he lost his job due to imports coming into this country. And I just want to tell you what that does to a man with 6 kids is devastating. So I never forgot that, looking into his eyes in my household, what that does to a family. You hear about it, but when you're actually involved and it impacts you, it'll never leave you.
That should never leave any of us. So now Donald Trump, the only Republican politician since Reagan who can actually fill a stadium, he's supposed to listen to the same people who helped get our country into the mess that he's been trying to dig us out of? The same people, by the way, who couldn't see any of this coming and still do not really see the threat that China poses to the United States, to freedom, and yes, to the free market. I think it's time for the party to unify behind the president's vision and give his policies a real fighting chance. And that goes for the White House staff as well. President Trump needs key staff people around him who support his America First agenda. Of course there can be disagreements. That's all healthy and good. But his core principles of ending illegal immigration, creating fair trade policies that benefit American workers, and stopping endless wars, they have to be sacrosanct. With Hope Hicks gone, he needs a communications director who's a real seasoned strategist, one who will clearly articulate the president's message and drive it home with great events like that one that we just showed you from the White House last week, and voices that reinforce his policies. And yes, that requires daily message discipline and real experience. It's essential. The chief of his economic council should similarly be someone who will advance his policies, not advocate against them. Gary Cohn is a really smart guy, but he was never going to see the wisdom of protecting American manufacturing. He's the kind of guy who's, he's basically fine with every auto job moving to Mexico so long as it benefits the bottom line of the companies making the cars. Well, the truth is, there really aren't that many U.S. economic nationalists around, to be fair. The president has enough people, though, who disagree with him. They're on Capitol Hill. He doesn't need another advocate for them in the White House. This is not a perpetual debating society. Anyone working for the president needs to know, on these key issues, the debate is over. The American people chose Trump's vision. So it's time to get with the program. And that's the angle. We begin tonight with an exclusive interview with someone who knows a thing or two about White House staff shakeups. He was White House Chief of Staff for President Trump from January until July 2017. Before that, he was chairman of the Republican National Committee. And we're pleased to welcome Reince Priebus. Reince, good to see you, man. How are you?
Great to be here. There's a lot to learn in that opening.
Yeah, come on.
Good stuff.
So what do you think about where we are right now? I mean, the Republicans We're going to get to what's happening on trade, but the House committee, the Intel committee today announced it's shutting down. They didn't find any Russian collusion. The president's been saying this consistently. What's your take?
Well, you might recall in the summer, about 6-7 months ago, there was starting to bubble up a call among political leaders, party leaders in our party that the Intel committees of both the House and the Senate should shut down because the Mueller probe would be so far-reaching that there would be no need for these committees to continue subpoenaing on people and interviewing people. And it was actually the president that said, no, let these committees do their work. So behind closed doors, the president was saying, no, let them keep going, because I know that eventually they're going to issue a report, and the report's going to say there was no collusion. We never talked to the Russians. We didn't negotiate with these people. So the president was actually very confident this would happen. I've never seen it. I, of course, never spoke to Russians at the RNC. I've never heard of other people doing it. Never talked to people like Papadopoulos and Carter Page. So, you know, I'm not surprised, but I would want people to understand that the president was also behind the scenes quietly saying, let these committees do their work.
Maxine Waters was on another network tonight, and this is just so hilarious. We had to play it for you. Let's watch.
Who would believe Nunes was working in a credible way to find out what took place? As a matter of fact, he was simply a messenger boy for the president, running up in the middle of the night, trying to prove that Obama, for example, had wiretapped the president. And so they can conclude whatever they want to. They weren't doing anything to begin with. It was not a credible investigation.
So that's what the Democrats' take is, that Nunes is a messenger boy. I don't know if that's very nice to say.
This is going to be their take through the midterms and through 2020. The problem in the midterms, of course, is that you've got marginal races that are in play. So, you know, 80% of the districts are either 90% Republican or 90% Democrat. There are no real marginal races other than maybe about 22 to 25.
We're going to get into the Pennsylvania race in a moment.
So this type of rhetoric isn't going to work. The impeachment rhetoric doesn't work in marginal races. These are generally people that want to see, you know, Washington work, and policy-driven type debates is what you're going to see in those marginal districts.
Yeah, and speaking of, I mean, on this trade issue, I mean, you're a free trader. When I hear free trade, I'm like, okay, I'm for trade. I want trade.
Free trade's great.
Yeah, but $150 billion trade deficit with Europe, $360 billion with China. Even with Japan, we have a $68.8 billion trade deficit. The South Korean free trade deal, each year, the deficits have grown and grown and grown. So my question is, how do you get leverage with these countries that are taking us to the cleaner on these trade? He's getting leverage now, is he not, with these tariffs?
You do what President Trump does, which is, if you see carefully what he's doing, is he puts the chips on the table. He puts the game plan on the table so people can see it and they can freak out about it. But then what he does is systematically he negotiates each piece. So Canada's off the board, Mexico's off the board, had a phone call with the Prime Minister of Australia over the weekend, tweeted out they're off the board. And eventually, I think what he's going to do is he's going to put the issue on the table. He's going to be able to negotiate with these countries like he's always wanted to do, one by one, bilaterally.
And we're doing this now. This is what I'm saying. The Republican Party is criticizing him, and he got the EU and Japan 2 days ago to say, we're standing against China trade abuses. Do you think they ever would have done that?
No.
With Lighthizer and Wilbur Ross, they never would have done that unless they were looking at trade tariffs.
But I would say this, in defense of some, you know, I liked your monologue. It was very intelligent, but in defense of part of it, the president chooses on his own to put people around him that don't agree with each other on major things. I mean, so even when I was there, it wasn't like, you know, it's a couple narratives that were incorrect on this tariff stuff. This wasn't something that the president suddenly came up with and then, oh my God, he just went up with the tariffs out of nowhere. This was something that was debated from before the inauguration. He wanted the steel and aluminum tariffs since before the inauguration. We debated it week after week after week, and he got pretty ticked off a few times at the staff and said, hey, where are my tariffs?
He's impatient for change.
Well, right, and it's not, but that's what makes him who he is.
Right.
But this was not, this was not something that just came about. He's been debating it forever. The other thing is, it's what President Trump is to put Wilbur Ross and Gary Cohn and Bob Lighthizer and Stephen Miller.
They're all
and
incredibly
Steve Bannon.
smart people.
Right, but also people that don't agree with it. I mean, some White Houses have the same species of people. Everyone's the same. He has no problem putting natural predators together. But and let them bring their A game and fight it out, and then he makes his decision.
Yeah, I really respect that, and I want to get into this.
I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I completely agree with you, and I don't mean to say there shouldn't be debates. I think on some of the core issues, at some point, you do have to just kind of,
But he's always going to go with his, I mean, in the end,
and he goes with his gut.
If it's close, he's going to go with his gut.
All right, let's talk about this Pennsylvania district. District is 18.
Yeah.
This is being watched by everybody. This is a district that Trump won big time, big league, and now it's really tight. It's going to be redrawn in November anyway, but this is being looked at as a big bellwether. Monmouth came out with the polls showing the Democrat 33-year-old prosecutor Connor Lamb ahead by a little. But you're not so sure the Democrats could pull this out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for the Democrats to pull this out. I think they may be overhyping this a little bit, and I think the Republicans are playing this pretty well by setting the expectations that that they may lose. Here's what the reality is. You're right. The president won this district by about 20 points. Today he's up by maybe anywhere from 10 to 12 or 13. He's right side up in the district. So there's been a loss of about 8 points in that particular place. Candidates matter, but what really this is going to be about, and people have been talking about it today, is turnout. And what I would explain to people is that in a district like this, if you had a bowl of popcorn, one was Republican, one was Democrat, the voters in the Republican bowl, the popcorn's all the way up to the top. In the Democrat bowl, the popcorn's about 2/3 of the way
I'm hungry now.
Right, you need some salt and butter.
My favorite thing.
But here's the thing, Republicans have a full bowl to turn out. If they do a really, really poor job and say only turn out 2/3, and the Democrats do a great job and get every single person out, then they can win. But it's still going to be very difficult.
I don't see it. I don't see it.
The data so far has been showing things trending back to the Republican over the last few days. So
I just don't see how you see that Trump speech in Pennsylvania and think that is mojo. I don't care what it says about Chuck Todd. I wouldn't have said it.
The one thing about it being a referendum on Trump, I think you have to throw that one out, because if Donald Trump was on the ballot today in that district, he'd win the district. So the question is the candidate chosen by the Republican?
Well, no one's going to be Trump,
and is the turnout in that district going to make the difference between the two parties? I think the RNC and the Republicans.
I'm feeling like I'm going back to 2012 with you at the RNC here. I'm getting the murder board out to see what districts won. All right, Ryan, stay with us, because we're going to talk about that issue of who should fill some key vacancies in the West Wing and what it could mean to the Trump agenda, and a lot more breaking tonight, right after the break. Now, welcome back. We're continuing our exclusive discussion with former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. After a tug of war with the president over tariffs, Gary Cohn, the head of the White House National Economic Council, he resigned last week. And now it's being whispered that Larry Kudlow, an old friend, who was a consultant to the Trump campaign, may take the job. Well, here's Kudlow earlier this month on CNBC talking about the Trump steel and aluminum tariffs.
He's so good on tax cuts. He's so good on deregulation, infrastructure. I even like him on immigration. He's never been good on trade. If we have to walk out of NAFTA or those negotiations totally break down, then this steel thing turns in from a minor irritant to a major calamity for our economy and our stock market.
Apparently he's had 2 conversations, Reince, with old Larry Kudlow, who's an old friend of yours and mine.
Yeah. No, I think,
what about that?
I think Larry's a great pick because, he's used the word Trumpian. He's respected by Wall Street, isn't afraid to push back. President respects him. So those are great combinations to have in the West Wing. But the
tariffs thing, you don't think?
I don't think the president doesn't care. I mean, he loves Gary Cohn. Gary hates the tariffs and still loves Gary, and we all do. And he likes having people around him that don't agree with each other. The president would be very bored, regardless of what people like to write in the media about the drama and the chaos. The president would be very bored if everyone came in and said, you're right, let's just do it this way.
So that's what the media is saying is he wants yes men around him saying, oh, you're great, you're so great, we love you, you're great. Yeah. That's like the rap on him, that he just wants constant praise and he's annoyed when people don't praise him.
He definitely wants to know when he's doing things well. But when it comes to decisions, there's nothing major that gets decided. I can attest to this. In the Oval Office, that is just a no-brain thing where people come in and he just makes a decision. People come in, they stand around his desk, he allows the argument to take place, they fight it out, he goes with whatever, not always his gut instinct, he backs off of things quite a bit. But what the media focuses in on is the process of the argument as opposed to the decision. And that is really what I always try to remind people to do. Focus in on the decision. ISIS, the courts, the tax cuts, the regulations, and yes, even the tariffs. I know a lot of people don't like it, but those are core issues that he's allowed a process that includes arguing among very smart people in front of the president, and he gets it done.
Well, what about the comms director? That's an important job. You know, everyone from someone like a Pat Buchanan in his day was a fantastic comms director for Reagan. There's been a huge turnover in the comms department. Hope Hicks, very close to the president. Didn't have a huge background in communications, but trusted. I hear that there's like someone who's sort of close to her who might be thought of for that job. And then you have Mercedes Schlapp, who is fantastic in my view, who's experienced and seasoned.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's an all-encompassing job, as you know. It's not just, you know, the press secretary is a big job, but the comms director has to do everything from work with the press secretary to make sure that the rapid response is in place, the surrogates are getting out on the networks, that everyone has
events, though, Reince. That event last week with the steelworkers was fabulous. Mercedes, I know, worked on that.
But all those events, whether it be Harley Davidson coming in, whether it be
get him out on the road, though. He's great on the road. He's great on the road.
Right. So the comms director job is extremely important, but also keep in mind it's with President Trump, who knows every article that's written. He watches all of the key moments that define the narrative. I've never seen a president or a politician more in line and in tune with what the daily narrative
They criticize him for that. Oh, you watch TV, you decide things on TV. That's what they always trash.
That's what a president needs to be concerned with. But I'm just saying, in regard to communications, I don't think in modern history there's been a president that cares more about what the American people are reading and perceiving that's being done by the administration.
Did he go over?
Well, that's not to be criticized.
Did he go over the line on the Chuck Todd comment on Pennsylvania?
I don't think I would use that language, no. I mean, I actually think Chuck's a professional, and I have nothing but respect for him.
You have nothing but respect for Chuck Todd? Are you kidding me? Have you seen what he said about you? I mean,
listen,
I don't know what he said about you.
I don't know what he said about me either.
I'm just guessing. He's been horrible to the president, and I don't think fair and balanced.
I would say that saying those words bring, I think, the unwanted attention and unwanted
I wouldn't use those words either.
Right. So that's my point.
Yeah.
So I think that it's something I would have avoided.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's his thing, though, right? It's his thing. Finally, on North Korea, I know you have something to say about that. It could be a big breakthrough. It's unbelievable that he's going to be meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Right.
What's your take, and how did that decision come?
I think the narrative on that got out of the gate all wrong. I mean, the idea that the president just on a whim decided to accept some invitation without even thinking about it. He had, as I understand it, when the South Koreans came into the Oval Office, the president had General Mattis in the office, he had General McMaster in the office, he had the vice president in the office, he had the deputy director of the CIA in the office, he had the DNI director Dan Coates in the office, and he had others in the office. So I think people just run with the narrative and don't realize that the president isn't just making these decisions in a vacuum. And so these are things that I think the American people need to know. And I think this is some things that a new comms director would correct immediately and get out in front of the people so that people understand that the president is surrounded by really, really smart people that talk and argue about things, and decisions are made, including whether or not to meet with the North Koreans.
Mercedes Schlapp, would she be good at comms? Not that I'm pushing anyone.
She'd be great at comms.
Yeah, she'd be great at comms. She should get it. Anyway, Reince, good to see you. All right. Hey, thanks for coming in. We really appreciate it. And you might think, by the way, that authorities would want to keep track of an illegal immigrant accused of killing a driver in a hit and run. Well, up next, we're going to tell you why that suspect is free tonight. Stay there. Well, this is an infuriating update on a story we brought you last week. The Denver sheriff is ordering an investigation into why his department released an illegal immigrant charged in a deadly DUI before ICE could detain him. Ivan Zamaripa Castaneda was charged with drunk driving and causing a fiery crash that killed a truck driver and shut down I-70 for hours on March 3rd. The Mexican national fled the scene but was arrested the next day. Well, Immigration's Customs Enforcement placed a detainer on him a week ago. The sheriff's department didn't notify ICE of the suspect's release until an hour after he posted bond, and then he left. Here to discuss these developments is Democratic strategist and former DNC Deputy Press Secretary Jose Aristimuño. Jose, it's great to see you. This is a wild case. I just learned about this, Jose. I was driving this morning, believe it or not, with my kids on I-70 to the Denver airport for about an hour and a half. And this crossed my, my cell phone, went off. And I was thinking, oh my, first of all, the road is dangerous. I wasn't driving. The road is dangerous. And this guy caused this fiery crash. He's released, and they didn't notify ICE until an hour after his release. Now, I know you're an advocate for illegal immigrants and the immigration process, but this ain't good for your case, I can tell you that.
Well, look, I'm not an advocate for undocumented immigrants who commit serious crimes. Any undocumented immigrant, and let me be clear, Laura, that have committed serious felonies, including this one, should be deported. Now, what I advocate for is this. We have to be very careful with this sort of cases because we don't want to generalize and allow people to think that a majority of immigrants are this sort of criminals, because it's not true. And you know it very well. Every year, the FBI releases reports that say under 10% of undocumented immigrants in this country are actually criminals. Should the sheriff department from Denver look into this? Absolutely, they should look into this. I don't know if there was a miscommunication or what have you, but of course it should be looked into.
Yeah.
We agree. Jose, Democrats and Republicans agree.
Yeah. Well, Jose, we have, sanctuary jurisdictions, which a good friend of mine the other day said we should call them fugitive jurisdictions because they're places where fugitives should go and live because they have a good life, because they'll be able to be released back into the community, even if they're arrested for criminal activity, because people like Kamala Harris, and I want to play this soundbite for you, from California, Senator from California, basically thinks the Immigration's Customs Enforcement should really no longer exist. Let's watch.
Should ICE exist? Well, certainly. I'm a prosecutor.
Yep.
I believe that there needs to be serious, severe, and swift consequence when people commit serious and violent crimes. One human being kills another human being, a woman is raped, a child is molested, there needs to be serious consequence. And certainly, if they are undocumented, they should be deported if they commit those serious and violent offenses. So yes, ICE has a purpose. ICE has a role. ICE should exist.
Yeah, just to be clear, she was actually got killed in commentary afterward because she, as a senator from California, said ICE should exist. Now, that's how left the Democrat Party has gotten. If someone like Kamala Harris says, of course you need enforcement. You need people who can go into communities and remove the dangerous elements. But it's really hard to do that, Jose, when we have an Oakland mayor who is thwarting federal immigration officials by announcing to immigrants, oh, guess what, they're coming.
Well, you know what? If we actually had a president who had the leadership to pass comprehensive immigration reform, Laura, we wouldn't be in this whole debate about sanctuary cities, because you know this very well. A majority of immigrants in this country are law-abiding citizens. They contribute to our economy. They create
Jose,
jobs every single year.
That argument, if you say 10%, I think you said 10% of illegal immigrants commit crimes.
Under 10%.
Right. Yeah, okay, under 10%. Well,
under 10%.
Is that okay? I mean, if there are 12 million people here illegally, 10% of that is a lot of people. I mean, we don't need any more criminals in the United States.
Let me tell
you.
you.
We have plenty of criminals.
I agree with you.
It's illegal immigration for a reason. It's not legal. We're for legal. If you want to improve legal,
and I agree.
Great.
Laura, you and I agree on that, but let me be clear, though. If we legalize a majority of the undocumented population in this country, wouldn't it be a whole lot easier to actually look for the ones that commit violent crimes? It would be a whole lot easier, because we're not looking in an ocean of 14 million or what have you undocumented immigrants. Let's put them on the back of the line. Let's ensure that they assimilate into our country, that they learn English, that they pay back taxes. But we got to do something, because what they have right now is amnesty.
Yeah, well, Jose, why do you think we have so many court-appointed interpreters in courts today, in state courts, traffic courts? Sadly, I've been in traffic court a few times. And you have state-appointed interpreters for people who've been in the country for 10, 12, 15 years. You talk to any cop who has to appear in court regularly in Northern Virginia, they're like, oh, yeah, we got like 15 different interpreters. They're having to speak various languages, not just Spanish, by the way. So the idea that everyone's coming here and everyone's assimilating, it's just not true. People are coming here speaking their own languages because they can. And I don't think that helps assimilation at all.
look, we should put in system a place that helps them assimilate, want to assimilate better, make it easier for them, create a system to make that happen. And it's that simple. But all those sort of things that you want to address, Laura, guess what? President Trump can do it if he puts together an actual comprehensive immigration reform plan.
Jose, 1.8 million Dreamers would have gotten amnesty. The Democrats did not want to give him that campaign issue. Almost
That's not true, Laura. That's not true.
2 million almost.
He took away DACA. He took away DACA. He took away DACA.
Okay.
He's the one that took it away.
Right.
We wouldn't be actually debating.
He would actually give them legal
if he didn't take it away.
Better than DACA. So you think that deal was a bad deal, 1.8 million, up from 800,000. That would have gotten amnesty under President Trump.
Horrible
You would
deal.
not have taken that deal.
It was a horrible deal.
Okay. That doesn't work for the American people.
He held the Dreamers hostage.
Yeah.
He held the Dreamers hostage
right.
to try to, to try to finish his obsession with a wall that we know that actually won't help America.
Okay, so you don't want a wall, and 1.8 million was no good. Okay,
we already have a wall. We already have a wall with Mexico.
It's just not realistic. All right, it's Jose. It's always good to have you on. We love having you on, so thank you so much. And by the way, it looks like the president will try a new approach to end school violence. Dan Bongino and Geraldo Rivera debate it next. All right, the left is apoplectic that the White House has decided not to pursue a proposal to raise the minimum age to buy some types of rifles, while pushing for rigorous firearms training for teachers. Let's discuss the merits of these ideas with Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, and former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, who is a contributor to NRA TV. All right, Geraldo, what up with this? I mean, the president came out early on and indicated that, he'd be in favor of raising the age to buying these weapons, and conservatives were screaming about it, but now it doesn't look like anything's going to happen.
Well, I was profoundly disappointed by the president's vacillation on it. The last time Dan and I debated was the 17th of February, and that was at a dinner with the president at Mar-a-Lago, where I suggested raising the age so that it was at least as hard to buy an AR-15 as it is to get a bottle of beer in Florida. I want to congratulate the students of Parkland High School. I want to congratulate Governor Rick Scott. Florida did pass the raising the age limit from 18 to 21, also a 3-day waiting period and some banning of bump stocks and so forth. The president, when I had dinner with him, had just come out of the hospital. He had seen the savage nature of the wounds inflicted on these young people by that awesome destructive weapon, and he was moved by it, and I'm shocked that he blinked and backed down from the NRA, and I lament it and hope that he comes back to the position that he's held at various times in the last 3 weeks.
Dan.
Geraldo, again, that's a false equivalence. Saying that you have to be 21 to purchase alcohol, a mind-altering substance, and comparing it to maybe a 20-year-old who wants to defend themselves with a shotgun living by themselves, or an 18-year-old who wants to hunt is absurd. I mean, I could throw the very same analogy at you. Geraldo, down in Florida, you can drive a car at 15. Maybe we should be able to buy a rifle at 15. You're comparing apples to oranges.
You can't buy cigarettes until you're 21 in many states. I think it's the reason.
And that has nothing to do with firearms.
Adulthood for the young people is that they evolve. Kids have all kinds of issues, like Cruz obviously did in Parkland. They are going through their being bullied, or their girlfriend breaks up with them, or they're growing.
Yeah, but
Geraldo, they're becoming adults.
Geraldo, most firearms fatalities occur with handguns. We know that, right? Some handguns you have to be 21 to buy as well in other states. But I think what Trump probably came out and saw is like, we banned assault weapons from 94 to 2004. All the studies demonstrated that we didn't decrease the number of fatalities because of that assault weapons ban. And I think when he looks at these measures, which sound good, I mean, the Justice Department Institute for Justice actually did a comprehensive review after the assault weapons ban, and they weren't being pro or con. They just said it didn't really have an effect. So I think the president, the emotional moment, I agree with you. I think he probably reacted to that. But after an amount of time, I think he probably said, there's a lot we could do to prevent this beyond going to the quick legislative fix. And I bet that's where he came down. But Geraldo.
I just think that the NRA is so awesome in its vindictive power that it can unleash on anyone, that the president was even mocking many of the legislators in that meeting, saying, you're afraid of the NRA, you're afraid of the NRA. I'm the only one who's not afraid of the NRA. And guess what? When he had those series of meetings with the NRA folks, he changed his position on it. Why? I think that there's a direct correlation between the pressure the NRA inflicts on any elected official and their actions. It is something that's very, very depressing, particularly when the people want change. The majority, if you ask about, these various surveys taken, everybody wants change. It's a very small minority that have Dan's position.
I think you could say the same thing about the power of Planned Parenthood and the Democrat Party too. There's like no room for the debate there, and there's a lot more mortality involved with Planned Parenthood on an annual basis of 325,000 babies were aborted. But Dan, you can wrap up.
Yeah, Geraldo, listen, I'm running with about 4,999,999 more people in the NRA. You may have missed their numbers, but it's about 5 million Americans and probably a lot more who think they're members of the NRA. To say that this is some kind of small group like it's the Empire from the Star Wars series is utterly outrageous. The NRA's power is in that 5 million people show up and vote for their Second Amendment right to defend themselves.
Wait until the
like it's some gang on Long Island is ridiculous.
March 24th. Wait until the march of all those children for change. You'll see a march.
All right. We'll be covering it, that's for sure. And by the way, guys, Austin, Texas is gripped by fear tonight. What police are now saying about the deadly package explosions across the city. New information when we return. A string of package bombs has struck terror across the city of Austin, Texas. Authorities are scrambling to find a suspect and are revealing disturbing new information tonight. Fox's Trace Gallagher joins us now with more from our Los Angeles bureau. Trace.
Laura, and so far this bomber is lethal and very elusive. At 6:45 this morning, a 17-year-old boy found a package on the front step, brought it into the kitchen to open, where it exploded, killing him and injuring a 40-year-old woman. It's unclear if that was his mom. Witnesses say the explosion was loud. Authorities say it was also powerful and similar to the package bomb that killed a 39-year-old man on March 2nd. And just as police were investigating the parallels of the first two bombs, a third package exploded, severely injuring a 75-year-old woman. Now investigators are looking at patterns. For example, because the packages have all been found in the morning, they believe the bombs are dropped off at night in boxes that appear to be about the same size. And the police chief told Martha McCallum the bomb maker is no amateur. Watch.
It takes a certain level of skill to be able to build a device like this and then deploy it to your intended target without having it explode in the process. We're seeing how easily they explode once the victims are handling them. So there is a certain level of skill that is going along with what this individual or individuals are doing.
We know the first two explosions happened about 12 miles apart. The third bomb went off 5.5 miles from the second. Both victims who died are African American. The 75-year-old female, who's in critical condition, is Hispanic. Police are not ruling anything out, but they say it's too early to tell if the victims were the intended targets or if these might be hate crimes. Surveillance cameras near the locations are now being scanned to see if the video captured any potential suspects. The packages were not delivered by the Postal Service or shipping companies like FedEx and UPS. And police are now telling everyone in and around the Austin area that if a box shows up at your home and you did not expect it, to call 911. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Ted Kaczynski mailed and planted several package bombs around the country that killed 3 and injured several more. It took investigators nearly 18 years to bring him to justice. Laura.
Trace, thanks so much. And when we return, the last bite.